told it's overrated. I don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah, people like it. But I gotta, first of all, welcome back, Jess. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
I'm looking at your LinkedIn, and I'm jealous because you have 10,600 followers, and I have a measly 2,500. And so now I have follower envy, and I'm
Well, it's
impressed
been
with
a
that.
process.
I'll bet. I'll bet. But
Mhm.
I'm looking through, just doing my research to
Mhm.
welcome you to the show proper. And as I'm looking through this, I'm thinking to myself, you're doing what I wager a lot of people in learning and development. You're living the life that they'd like to live. And because I think of all the times that I've spent thinking, I should just start my own thing. I should just go out and
Mm.
start my own thing and be a consultant. And it's difficult to leave the safety of the job. It's difficult to leave the security that you have in that paycheck, and yet you're coming up on 3 years of being
Mhm.
self-employed, and I'm just curious, how's it going for you?
Well, I would say there's pros and cons.
Okay,
So,
tell me that.
definitely there's pros to it, but there's definitely cons. I mean, I when I left corporate, it was very intentional that I was gonna start my own business, and I left with an exit plan. So, I didn't just leave one day and say, "I'm not gonna do it anymore." I took a couple gigs subcontracting with some other smaller consulting companies, so I would still have income for a little bit, which was a good idea in theory because I did have income. But I couldn't build my own business outside of that because I didn't have any time left in the day to do that, and so there was that. I like that I'm kinda building my own thing. I can be as
Mhm.
creative as I want. I can be flexible with my time. I can pretty much work from anywhere. I can say yes to things I wanna do and no to things I don't, so all of those are bonuses. I miss working with the team, I'll be honest. I
Yeah.
kind of I kinda wish I had some other folks to work with on a daily basis. So there's also differences when you're a consultant and you're external versus internal. I feel like when you're internal, you can play the long game. So if you really want to make a difference and an impact in an organization, that doesn't happen overnight. As a consultant, oftentimes you're asked to come in and do one specific thing, and you don't have access to that full longer term impact, which to me I enjoy. So there's, like I said, there's pros and cons to it. Definitely.
Yeah, there's so many times in my past I look back and I think, "I don't miss that job, I don't miss that place, I miss the people there."
Right?
I used
Always.
to say that. I mean, I lived on an island in Alaska that was as close to Japan as it was Seattle. It was difficult to get more remote, and I think to myself, "That wasn't that bad." It's funny how often we fall victim. I think it was Dante who said, "Within our own mind, we can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven." And it's amazing how so
Yeah,
often
we
we will
do.
make that hell while we're there, and then when we look
Mhm.
back, it's like, "Eh, wasn't that bad. I miss the people."
Mhm. What's that there's that other quote too, like, "I wish I knew I was in the good old days before they were
Yeah,
gone," or something like that? I don't know.
that's from The Office.
Yes, it is. I'm an Office fan.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I love it. I love that's one of the that that that'll hit you. I mean, when you're sitting there and you hear Andy say, "I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old
Mhm.
days when they were
Mhm.
happening." And that's
Mhm.
so true. That's so true.
Mhm.
But I look at you're doing your own thing now. So you have the podcast, L&D must is it, yeah, L&D must change podcast. You've got the newsletter, which I subscribe to, by the way, great newsletter. And now you're an author and you've got a new book out. I see it on your bookshelf back there. L&D order taker no more. So I want to get to what's in the book, but then I want to talk a little bit about the process that you went through to do that, because I'm sure there's a lot of people, myself included, who are like, well, what's it take to write a book? What's that process like? But first, let's talk about the book itself. What do you got going on there? L&D order taker no more. I have an idea. Oh, tell me about the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's this whole concept of the very transactional work that we get stuck in, the order taking box, versus the work as a strategic business partner. Somebody that's we're working in lockstep with the business on the largest strategic initiatives, solving the biggest talent challenges. We're in the room where it happens, if you will, and we're able to really be in it with the business. And we have the measures to show that. Now, the reason I wrote the book is because I had been working for a long time in learning and development and thinking, the best way to do this work is to make really interactive and engaging experiences for those who are participating. So I spent a lot of time learning what that looked like, all the best learning practices, all of that. Well, when I eventually in my career became a leader of learning and development teams, I discovered that that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for us to spend all of our time perfecting our product. And the way I discovered it was, when I was sitting across from a stakeholder, and that person looked at me and straight in the eye and said, "The training your team created wasn't good enough." And I know it was good enough
Oof.
because the training itself, I know it's like one of those knife to the gut and then twist it, right? But
Right.
I knew it was good enough. It followed all the best practices. It was well created. The problem wasn't the training. The problem was that the training would have never solved the issue that this person thought that the training would solve in the first place. And they still, because they thought the training will solve it, they came to us and said, create this training. We did. They thought, well, it must be that the training isn't working. And that wasn't the issue. And so I knew we needed to work differently. But at the time, there wasn't much in this learning and talent development world to tell us how to do that. And so I started to study parallel professions. I looked at project management and sales and marketing and performance consulting and started to take little pieces from each of those and test them out and try them out on our team to see how we could shift to work differently. And after, I think it was probably about 3 years, we got to the point where we were strategic business partners. We were no longer order takers. People weren't coming to us saying, I need a 30-minute e-learning or I need a classroom training. The narrative was they would come and say, hey, we know you're good at solving problems. Will you help us figure out what's going on here and then help us create the solution? And sometimes it was learning and sometimes it wasn't. And we'd sort of let them off on their way. But the expectation was not that you will create this training and it will solve all our problems. And then we got to be more strategic and work on, like I said, those big issues. So I knew that when that happened and we were having a blast and it was so fun and we were making a huge impact, I knew that why I kind of asked a question, why doesn't everybody work this way? Like what are we missing in learning and development? And this isn't a new conversation. I just think not that many of us have cracked the code or made it work. And so I started asking questions and interviewing dozens and dozens of learning leaders and asking them, are you able to work this way? If you were, what'd you do? And if you aren't, what's holding you back? And then all of that became the book. So it is my story. It's also the story of all these I interviewed. And my aim was to create a very practical handbook to help others make this transition, the handbook that I never had when I wanted to make that change. So that's the why behind the book. I'm not even sure anymore if that's the question you asked.
It's okay. That's an amazing story though, because what it reminded me of, it reminded me of the first real trainer training I ever sat through with Bob Pike. It was in
Oh,
2018. It was his master trainer certification. And one of the things he talked about in there was his solutions cube. Have you heard of this one?
I don't know. I done Bob Pike. And I did Bob Pike in 1996. So
Wow.
I mean, it was like the very first conference I went to that ruined me because it
Hmm.
made me start asking questions about what we're doing and if it's really effective. So
Yeah.
I don't remember the solutions cube. So tell me more
I
about it.
Well, I can't give you it had
Okay.
6 things to it, but one of the
Mhm,
things that I remember from it that your story reminded me is that Bob would say, "Training is rarely the solution. In
mhm,
fact, it's usually the last solution."
mhm.
And he would talk about things like, if you're having a performance issue, you need to look at things like systems. Is there a systems problem? So, I'm curious, in your book, how do you help change that paradigm of the trainer who thinks they need to prove their worth as
Mhm.
a trainer? Oh, there's a problem. How do you change that mindset that training will fix it? Because so often when you operate from that mindset, you're really setting yourself up for failure. Because when you come at this as a training problem and training's not the solution, you are actually hurting your own brand and you're
Mhm.
hurting the brand of the training department. And I hate to be that person, but you're making it easier to get rid of the training department later
You
when they say,
absolutely are.
well, none of the training worked. So why do we even need them? So how
Mhm.
do you help change that paradigm? Because it's really critical that we not set ourselves up for failure and we not add more fuel to that fire that training is an expense, not an investment.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot. I talk about a number of blockers in the book, and we like to say there's organizational blockers like, oh, leadership doesn't hear us, or, oh, we don't have a seat at the table, or all of those. And maybe some of those are true. But the one thing that we don't often do, and what I discovered, was turn the mirror around. And so I like to coin us as in learning and development, we're kind of masters in the art of unintentional self sabotage. And one of the ways that unintentional self-sabotage is the things that we think are helpful, but are actually keeping us in the order-taking box. And what you just described is one of those acts of unintentional self-sabotage, which is that we really want to be helpful and that we know what we're good at. And so automatically, when we go into a conversation with a stakeholder, we want to jump to solutions so we can help them using the things that we're good at. So we know that we can be successful in creating a really awesome training because that's what we do. So we know we're good at that. So we're listening intentionally in that conversation for all the places we can plug in that solution. And if we are listening in that way, then we don't hear the rest of what's being said, and we might not even ask the questions to learn more. So, one of the things that I used to talk with my team about and that we did was work really hard to say, whenever you get a request for a training, you need to make an assumption. And the assumption you need to make is that you don't know the problem or the solution yet. And you need to first try to figure out the problem before you figure out the solution. And not only do you not know the problem or the solution, but the stakeholder that's asking you probably doesn't know it either. Because the other thing that we do, this is kind of self sabotages us, is we assume that they've already vetted the solution. And we assume that they've done the work to figure out that training is really what's needed. I mean, that's what I used to do. And they would even come using our language. Like they'd say, they don't know how to do X, and so therefore they need training. Well, to your point, maybe they do, maybe they don't. And I can give a couple examples, but basically there's a lot of things we can't outtrain. We can't outtrain a misaligned reward system. We can't outtrain the manager that won't give feedback. We can train somebody on how to give feedback, but if they don't give it, that training isn't going to help. We
Right.
can't outtrain a clunky system. We can't outtrain lack of information or resources. We can't outtrain, a lack of information. We can't outtrain unclear expectations. So those are some of the things that if we can kind of have in our head and we can think about as we're asking questions, we need to act more like a curious detective and less like somebody that's there to provide a solution. So that's maybe one sort of approach.
Yeah, I think about a question that I used to ask when someone would approach me for a training, and it would always made them feel a little uncomfortable because it's a very direct training. And I would say, could they do this if their life depended on it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if legitimately, if their life depended on it, could they perform this action?
Mhm,
And if they'd say yes, then I'd say, then this isn't a training issue. This sounds like
mhm,
maybe it's a systems issue or a coaching issue. Have
mhm.
have you talked to them about it? And you'd get some folks who are like, it's just, can you just train them? I'm like, that's not going to solve the problem.
So you don't have to have the critical conversation with them?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
So
sure.
once you get into that mode, there's going to be situations where you have to have those uncomfortable conversations. How do you handle those?
Yeah, you have to be not afraid of that. Now, how I generally approach it is I approach it as if not from a helper mindset, but from I'm not here to help you. I'm here to partner with you in solving the problem. The reason why stakeholders come to us in the first place is because they have some kind of a pain point. And ultimately, they want that fixed. They don't really want training. They want their problem fixed. And so it's almost like metaphorically, I scoot on the same side of the same table as them. And
Mhm.
I'm like shoulder to shoulder, kind of saying, all right, we're going to get in here and we're going to figure this out. And I'm always make it not about me, but about the win for them. So it's like, I'm going to ask you a couple questions I haven't asked you before, but that's because I want to make sure that if we go into this and we do create this training, that we really nail it. And we make sure that whatever's happening here, that we can really solve it. So let me ask you a few more questions and then I'll do that. And oftentimes if it gets to the point where we realize it's not a training issue, I almost never have said to somebody, this isn't a training issue. A couple times I have. But what I will typically do is something like this. Like, um, let me give you, well, let me give you, can I just tell a story? Can I give you an
Sure.
example?
Of
Okay.
course.
So let's say there was one group that I went to, they had requested a communication boot camp because they needed communication training for all their customer account executives because they weren't meeting turnaround times and all these other things. And they had a 16 module already lined out for me of all the things they needed. Now, there were two managers for this team of maybe 40 to 50 people. And I sat down with both of the managers, and very quickly, as I asked a few questions, even kind of like, what does good look like? It was clear they did not align on expectations at all. And this team was hemorrhaging people. Like they couldn't keep anybody on the team. And so they thought, well, they just need to be better at communication and then they'll win, right? Well, one manager wanted this team, if they knew the answer to a complicated question or they thought they could figure it out, to spend their time diving in and doing all the analysis. The other manager said, no, if you don't know that, even if you think you could figure out that complicated answer, it's going to take you too much time. You need to hand over any complicated issues to our analyst team. They'll do the deep dive. You just facilitate the conversation with the customer. So right away now, I'm sitting in the seat as a team member, and manager A is on duty, and I do things the opposite way, and I get that manager A expects, and I get my hand slapped. So the next day, I think I'm going to do it the other way, and then manager B is on duty, and I get my hand slapped there. So right away, it became very clear that the expectations were not aligned between these two managers. And so instead of really saying I'm not going to do the training, what I said was, this is really interesting. And that's kind of always how I say it, like, wow, we're discovering something here. This is really interesting. It's going to be really difficult for us to do any type of training well if we're unclear on the direction or the outcome of what should happen and how people should do their work. And so, why don't the two of you, like I would advise that the two of you go ahead, figure out where you need to clarify the expectation, talk to your team about it, and then, if you're still having these issues, come back to me and we'll discuss the training further. They never came back.
Hmm.
So it's kind of the like, not that we're not going to do this. It's that maybe not yet, or this needs to happen first. Let's try this and then we'll do this. So there's different ways to approach that conversation with stakeholders, that maybe that difficult conversation. But I always kind of approach it as I'm on your side. I want your team to win. I want you to win. And we're going to figure out what that means, whether or not the answer is training.
I was hearing a scene from Office Space where he said, "I have 7 bosses."
Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry, come again? Yeah, yeah, one day I'm here, this guy expects this, the next day I come in, they
Mhm.
expect this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, so I just don't do anything, and now they want me to sit through training. But
Mhm.
and that's often how I won't say often, but sometimes you'll find that. But one thing I wanted to really highlight is I love the way that you said, "I sit on the same side of the table as them."
Yeah. The
Because so
same side
often
of the same table.
yeah, excellent point, because so often that table, that can be a barrier, and it can show we're in opposition here,
Mhm. And
and
we're
moving
not.
around to that side is a fantastic move.
And I wouldn't say that I actually ever, like, did that physically, but metaphorically, I would kinda put myself there of, "Hey, we're on the same side of the same table. We're not on 2 different tables trying to go at it from 2 different directions. We're gonna tackle it together as a team," is the attitude and approach I would take. Now, I wouldn't
Mhm.
ever tell them that, but that was how I approached it in my own head, which made a difference, which is one of the things anybody can do actually, is think about themselves not as a helper, which is goes back to your solutioning too quickly. When we think of ourselves as, I'm here to help. How can I help you? I show up with this energy of tell me what to do and I will help you. Whereas if I show up instead with this mindset of I'm your partner in problem solving, I ask completely different questions. I'm more thoughtful about it. I don't jump to the solution right away, and it's much less transactional and much more back and forth. It also puts some ownership on the stakeholder, honestly. And it's a different type of conversation. I've even, in different workshops, when I've been working with teams, I've even had them do a role play where they show one time they show up as a helper, and then the next time they show up, same request, same stakeholder, as a partner, and even just in their mindset to see what's different. And it's pretty powerful.
One thing that I hate to be I bring Bob up again. One thing that he taught me that I think leads right into what you're talking about is I remember we were having a conversation and I was talking about being a trainer. And he said, Dwayne, you're not a trainer. You've got to stop thinking of yourself as a trainer. You're a performance improvement specialist.
Yes,
And
please.
I was like, what? And he goes, yes,
Mhm.
your whole point. He says, what have we talked about? The purpose of training is what? And I'd say the purpose of training is to improve performance. He said, you're a performance improvement specialist. And if you keep thinking of yourself as a trainer, training will always be your solution.
Mhm. It's one of those things that keeps you in the box. I mean, I
Mhm.
think a lot lately I've been thinking about we got to get back to and talk more about what is the purpose, like your conversation with Bob. What is the purpose or the reason why learning and talent development is in organizations in the first place? I mean, because organizations don't fund full departments of people to be nice or do nice things. So there's a reason why we exist, and that reason is to improve the performance of people, to help the organization meet their objectives, their goals through by equipping and enabling the performance of the people within that organization, whether that's filling skills gaps or upskilling them to something different or helping them learn. But that's really the purpose of our work. And sometimes we forget that because we fall in love with our own solutions, I think, too. Oh, this great. It would be so fun to do. Oh, we can do this leadership program. That's a great thing. And we can make it super interactive. And all of a sudden our minds are buzzing with all the solutions to go back to that. And we forget that what the actual purpose is that the organization wants us there.
Right. Well, I've got a spot on my bookshelf right back there for your book. So I'm
Yay.
looking forward to getting it. I'm going to buy it, devour it, because this really speaks to me as far as not just being there to say, "Oh, yeah, we can do that training." Because again, you're setting yourself up for failure. Is all if all you ever do is say, "Oh, yeah, we can do that." You're not going to create any value at times. You're not going to improve performance. And very often you're going to be setting yourself up to find yourself with your desk in a box as you walk out
Hmm.
the door. So
Yeah.
we've got a few minutes left. One thing I've always thought about doing is writing a book. Um, I'm sure there are quite a few people listening who have also thought about writing a book. So if you can help me understand the process that you went through from the idea of I should write a book to now being on the podcast and speaking tour talking about your book.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I didn't really start off thinking I was going to write a book. I just started thinking I'm going to do more writing. And
Okay.
so this was probably 10 years ago ish. I started writing a blog, a regular blog, and it was on leadership development at that point. It no longer exists. I've archived it. I still have the content, but I've archived it because it wasn't necessarily relevant. I was doing a lot more leadership development at that time. And I just got in this process of regularly writing. And so, first off, that helped me. I didn't really have an audience. I mean, I maybe had 100 people who looked at it, maybe. But for me, it was helpful in my process of how do I write? How do I synthesize ideas? How do I organize them? And I liked it. I liked doing it. In some ways, it just helped me to process information. And what I realized through that process was at that point, it wasn't as important as what I did, or how many people saw it, but I was building a body of work. And so once I started really going down this route now more of our profession needs to hear this message that this is possible to move from order taker to strategic business partner and how to do that and how to lead a learning and development team or function. I started writing about that. And I started writing about the things that were just playing in my head. And I started building a body of work. And this was several years ago. And once you've written enough blog posts or articles, you essentially have a book. I'll just say
Mhm.
that. So start writing now. Just start writing articles, small things. Even if nobody sees them, you're going to hone your craft and you're going to start building up some ideas and thoughts. So by the time then, when I got to this place where I knew I was going to write a book, I had ideas already. And all I needed to do was take a lot of the concepts I already frequently talked about or wrote about or worked out with my team and organize them in such a way that they made sense for my goal, which was to create this handbook I never had. And so that process then I had to create an outline, I had to pitch a publisher, I had to write a sample chapter and all of those things, and then I ended up working with ATD Press, and they've got a great editorial team that helped me walk through that whole process. But the process of start to finish for me for writing the book was about 4 years. And that was
Wow.
from me just starting to, like, conceptualize it and write about it on a regular basis, not in a book format, just in, like, articles. And then I sort of started to test out concepts. I'd talk about them with people and kind of see what stuck. And then it was the whole writing process of I did all the research, all the interviews, and then pitching the publisher, like I said, writing the sample chapters, and then the writing itself. That all took about 2 years, and then by the time it was published. So, it was a long process for me, a long journey, but it also began I didn't just wake up one day and say, "I'm gonna write a book." Like, I sort of built that over time.
Well, you've got a speaking tour coming up, and I'm looking at it right now, and it's like you lost a bet because you spend some time in Orlando, and then you leave sunny Orlando and fly to Fargo,
Yeah.
and you're gonna be warm in
Yep.
Orlando and then fly to Fargo, and it's gonna be, it's October in Fargo, so it'll be cold.
It is.
So, uh, that's how you get sick, Jess. You're
No,
gonna have to
I
be
won't get
careful.
sick.
I all right,
I'm
then you got
taking all the
Houston
vitamin.
and Tempe. A lot coming up. A lot
Uh-huh.
coming up. Good for you. Well, I
Yeah.
wish I'd known that you were in Phoenix because I was just out there not long ago, and I
Ah,
would have bought you lunch,
yeah, that would've been
and,
great. Next time.
definitely. I love Phoenix, and people say, "Well, why do you like Phoenix?" I'm like, "First of all, Phoenix is a cool town. Second of all, Phoenix has some of the best thrift stores in the country."
Oh.
And do you
Hmm.
not know that?
I do not know this.
Oh, yeah, I love that's when I travel, I would always find the best thrift stores, and
Huh.
Deseret Industries in Phoenix are some of the best, so,
Okay. Noted.
um, love going out to Phoenix, but I'm gonna encourage everyone to sign up for your podcast, sign up for your newsletter, and go out and buy the book because this is important. I mean, this mental model shift, this paradigm shift in what we do is key to being seen as a value creator and as a valuable part of the team, not being expendable. And most importantly, you're actually helping improve performance, is what you're supposed to be doing. So, Jess, thanks for writing this and thanks for joining the podcast. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was a joy to be here. Thank you.